Hey, how you doing? I found something really rare at my surplus store. They only had one of them. Sorry, I gotta show it to you. Now this looks rather unremarkable. It's called a yote. It's made by Eagle Industries. Yeah, just looks like a multicam backpack. Well, it kind of is, except it's worth upwards of $400, $600. Yeah. It's missing a couple straps. I had to replace one with a leather strap here. This one I actually surgically removed an unnecessary strap and sewed it on over here. Make sure it's really tough. Yeah, these are actually really rare and valuable. These are carried by like Navy SEALs and Delta Force. Quite amazing how well this made. It's true mil spec. It's that kind of rare mil spec that you don't come across. I fixed it. I got it for 60 bucks. I know you just think it's just a backpack, but anyway, I didn't know if you'd find that fascinating or not. I did, because I know how rare that thing is. It's really rare. I've seen beat up ones that look like they were drugged behind a truck for 1,000 miles go for $400+. Yeah, that thing. And they always get bid on like crazy. They're highly desirable. Yep. Think about the great lesson of nothing. And I kind of say that tongue-in-cheek when I say nothing. And by the way, when we talk about nothing, humanity loves to confuse nothing with not a thing. Not a thing would, of course, be a reference to a phenomena. And human beings always see things upside down and backwards. And I want to talk about things that don't exist, and that's concept reification. And of course, I've talked about those. There's a little mosquito in here, a little bug. I'll edit that out of this video. 9 primary things. I actually added 3. There's actually a longer list, but there's 9 primary things. But also, too, some high priority ones that are well above those 9 and fundamentally the 12. By the way, and make a brief discussion about something that I've not discussed before, at least not at any length, is the premise in metaphysics. And this is where beliefs and people, debating back and forth has existed for, tens of thousands of years, and that human beings, especially if they're ignorant, which basically entails most human beings, they confuse the 2 shadows, and they confuse the 2 lights, and they also, too, confuse the 2 divines. That which is beautiful, of course, that which is beautiful is most close to the mirage. In other words, it's an imprint of the divine. There's shadows of the unmanifest, i.e. the absolute, and there's a really crude analogy. There actually is a little hole right here and the sand's pouring through it, but this would be the shadow of the unmanifest, no different than light, because you can't see it. And the true analogy of the hyperboloid between phenomena, which is down here, and of course these actually have mass and measure on the 2 lobes of the hyperboloid, of the hourglass shape. Yeah, but these things are unreal, but these are the things that we consider to be real, because we can see the sand here, and we actually count the sand, and we know mass, and we know magnitude, and these have mass and magnitude, and we measure time by them. We don't measure time by what happens here, even though we could see the sand at that little point. Don't take the analogy too far, since sand has to fall through something. In the true hyperboloid of nature, there's absolutely nothing here, and it has no Cartesian coordinate, no value whatsoever. But we think that's unreal. That's because human beings are ignorant. So we have 2 shadows, 2 lights, and 2 divines. We have the shadow, once again, of the unmanifest. That would be the center of the hyperboloid, i.e. the absolute. No different than the nave of a wheel. And you take a wheel off of an old chariot, there's just a hole there. And of course, there's the stave that goes through both. In ancient vehicles, the axle didn't move. In our modern axles, the axles do move, but not in chariots and wagons of times past. So, shadow of the unmanifest. Then we have the shadow that's actually cast by matter, and of course, I wrote an article about it. Hello. It's in the description below on Plato's Cave, discussing, of course, and there are 2 lights and 2 shadows in Plato's Cave. I've never seen any so-called guru academician of Platonism or Greek that's ever mentioned that there are 2 lights in Plato's Cave. It doesn't belong to Plato. It's far more ancient than Plato. Plato's Cave. Plato didn't come up with that. It's ancient, way more ancient than Plato himself. There are two lights and there's two shadows in Plato's. Who mentions that? Nobody, except for me, of course. So you have the shadow cast by matter, and this is also too in Plato's cave analogy, where we have the fire inside of the cave, and of course we have the two lights, one being the fire, which is the secondary light, and the primary light, of course, is the sun that's outside of the cave, i.e. the absolute, or the true light. So there's the two shadows in simplex. Light, which is always in the shadow, that would be the light right here, is completely unseen. And when we actually look at the supercell, of which I probably made 1,000 videos in the supercell, the center of the magnet is black, right? You've seen, I've literally got like 1,000 videos up on the supercell. It's black at the center. But that's where all the magnetism is coming from, and of course magnetism is a dielectric field. So that would be also to the black sun metaphysical analogy of the unmanifest absolute, i.e. light itself. Because once again, no one ever sees light. Nobody. They think they do, but they don't. They see illumination. So light, which is always in the shadow and unseen, i.e. the ether, or light itself, i.e. energy or inertia. Original definition of inertia. There's the light, of course, then, which is always seen, and that's the reflections from matter due to the dielectric permeability and magnetic permeability and dielectric permittivity, dielectric permittivity and magnetic permeability. That, of course, is the illumination, which has a frequency and a wavelength that bounces off all matter, and that is, of course, the only way by which we see. The actual light that's inhibited by the back of our eyes is not light that we see, rather illumination, which is frequency and wavelength. EMF, i.e. electromagnetic, electromagnetic radiation is the only means by which we're able to see light that falls on the back of our eyes. So we have the two lights. The light which is unseen, which would be out here. Excuse me. It would be the opposite of out here. Out here would be out here. This would be the opposite of out here. No Cartesian value, no mass, no magnitude. This is the light that nobody sees. And out here, of course, as we can see the purple crystals of the sand falling through the hourglass, just like the days of our lives, right? It's that old soap opera reference. I always had an hourglass. I didn't watch soap operas growing up, but I remember my grandmother watching, those, and I remember the introduction to that hideous soap opera drama. This is, of course, that which we see, the illumination, due to the permeability and permittivity of the matter, the gross matter of the sand. So here we have the two light, the completely unseen that people think they see but they never see, and the light, which of course is a reflection from matter. So we've covered the two shadows, we've covered the two lights. Now we need to cover the two divines. Remember when, like, the king would wear like a specially engraved, it was usually like a coral or carnelian, or it could be gold, it could be anything, and they'd actually press it into the wax on a special letter. Remember the people would drip wax on the sacred letter of the king, and to know that it was real, he would, because only one person in the world had it, and he'd press his ring into the impression of the wax. Here we get into the two divines, and that's kind of a near-perfect analogy. There's the divine as seen in nature, and this is where pantheists and panentheists actually get horribly confused. People worshiping nature, but nature is the lesser divine. It is the wax that has been imprinted with the logos of the divine analogous to the actual signet ring of the king, in which he presses into the wax, and the mirage thereof, the imprint of gross matter as cast by the divine seal. So the divine logos, which is never ever seen, but known through wisdom and retroduction, that's the unseen seal that nobody sees. Logos in true, which of course is the attribute of the one, that unseen logos, i.e. the unseen divine. I always laugh when people say that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and that's just completely ridiculous, and that's been proven with little babies before they could say or talk or anything, very, very young little, and they would recognize beauty on the TV screen and they would react accordingly. Long before they have any ideas of language and biases one way or another, they recognize beauty. So this idea of the beauty in the eye of the beholder, i.e. the beauty of the logos, is completely demonstrable. Now, the true beauty or logos is always unseen, just like the true light is always unseen. Nobody sees light, but they think they do. They see illumination, not light, i.e. the attributional side of that. Nobody ever sees the good or the one. They only see manifestation, which manifests as that which is good. They see the divine in it, but they see it as an impression. So the logos is manifest, and this, of course, is where evil comes in, and demonic entities. These entities, in their own upside-down wisdom, they see gross matter that is beautiful, and this is the reason why they're always trying to destroy what is beautiful, is they see it as corruptible, and it falls away, and its beauty fades, and all of this is true, but that is the mirage of the logos, i.e. the divine, and this is the reason, and by definition, any entity that is evil or demonic is completely devoid of wisdom. But they know the difference between doing what is good and doing what is bad, but they see what is good or the divine as manifest matter if it is beautiful, and they're always trying to destroy it. I mean, it doesn't matter what religion or metaphysics it is, always evil entities are trying to corrupt and defile and debase what is good and beautiful, because they know it's gross matter, but they confuse it with the divine, because it's not the divine. Anyway, so herein is the two shadows and the two lights and the two divines, and one of these is real and the other one is absolutely nothing. It is a mirage or an imprint. And people cleave to beautiful things in nature, but they are necessitatively so transient. And they manifest and they get corrupted and they pass away. So let's get on to the 12 things that don't exist, and this is due to concept reification. Concept reification, unfortunately, is a horrific thing that human beings have been doing since time immemorial, beginningless time. I think this is a half-hour timer. Can't remember. I'm not timing myself yet. I'd like to go into the one that I've not covered as something that doesn't exist, and first off, let's go to the ether, and we have to talk about exist. Exist as an existence, to be objective and demonstrable, palpable, has mass and magnitude and measure, and it partakes of time, and it is usually composite. In other words, it's made of two or more things, just like a living being. This idea of transmigration or reincarnation of a living being is ridiculous, because a living being is a consubstantiation of matter and spirit, and that, of course, makes collectively, kind of like, flour, eggs, and whatever the heck else it is you use to make a cake. All of these things make up a cake. The cake doesn't, transmigrate anywhere, because the cake, these things fall apart. A cake is a composite, a temporal, spatial. It had a beginning in time, and therefore necessitatively it has an end in time. There's a little bug flying around here. And just like a cake, a human being cannot transmigrate. Bob Sue Leary, the psychophysical corporeal being made of flesh and blood, could, of course, logically never transmigrate. The fundamental one regarding, I don't know what this little, I think it's a little fruit fly. I got some apples in the other room, and it may be buzzing around the apple. The ether exists. It is not demonstrable. It is not composite. It doesn't have a beginning in time and end. And people say, what's the ether made of? When someone says made of, they are by definition referring to something that is composed of two or more things. If the ether were made of anything, it would not be the ether by definition. You can't say the ether exists. Are you saying the ether doesn't exist? Yes, so far as the true definition of exists, the ether does not exist. Of course, is the ether real? When people say real in the generalized sense, they think of something palpable that they can lay their hands on and they could look at and feel, so on and so forth. And of course, the ether is not real and the ether doesn't exist. The ether is an undeniable substrate to all phenomena. So, pure definition, this is how foolish people go back and forth and debating whether the ether exists or not, or is real or not. What's the ether made of? Well, ether can never be made of anything, because it would completely negate the definition of the term ether. The last one, before I get to the primary 10, is beliefs. And of course, I've talked endlessly about beliefs and systems, and religion is secularized metaphysics, and all religions, by the way, have a beginning in time. Guru, bada bing, established the great book and the great teachings of Guru Bada Bing, whoever that is or is not. And I have no interest in debating anybody on this, even though I easily could, because it doesn't get anywhere. You know, when you're trying to convert someone or change their mind, you know, wisdom is its own reward. There's the only people that actually enjoy trying to change the minds of other people are those that are in that belief system. In other words, if something can't be true, something cannot be truth if it isn't universal, and it had no beginning in time. If it is not universal, you know, it started in country, Guru Bada Bing was born in country AYZ. And then the teaching started then, which basically means everybody across the whole universe, which of course anybody with 2 brain cells knows there's countless civilizations across the universe. All those people are doomed, or if you if you didn't hear the good word from you know, Guru Bada Bing, Savior XYZ, you know, you're up the creek, and all you have to do is confuse somebody in one of these religions and say, well, what about the people that came before Guru Bada Bing came along? Well, they're waiting in limbo for his. It's just so reductio ad absurdum. Have you ever heard of that one? It's true because it's so ridiculous. Reductio ad absurdum. Boy. So all the 10 zillion people that naturally perished before Guru Bada Bing came, they're all waiting in limbo, like in some sort of hell state, to hear the good word from Guru. But yes, that's the way. It's like, that's just, I mean, you really, really, really have to lobotomize 99% of your brain to even consider something like that. But I don't care what people believe. It's none of my business. This is a belief system. In other words, if something has a beginning in time, it can't be a universal truth. There's just no way it can be. Nothing that is absolute, bottomless truth, timeless perfection of truth and wisdom can have a beginning in time, can only emanate from Guru Bada Bing. I mean, it's just the pinnacle of absurdity. You know, if you didn't hear the good word, then you're doomed for all eternity to, you know, to burn in purgatory. It's just, I'm sorry, I don't care what people believe in, but that's just completely ridiculous. So a belief system is absolutely nothing. It is a construct within someone's head. It is not a universal truth. It had a beginning in time, therefore it has an end in time, and since it had a beginning in time and an end in time, and it has a logos within your consciousness, then it cannot be a universal truth, and it can't be the path to wisdom. I'm sorry, it just can't be. If you want to argue with that on me, that's perfectly fine. I'd like to get to these remaining 10, and I've talked about these before, things that don't exist, and this is due to concept reification. Everybody on Earth has an idea of a unicorn. Even though unicorns don't exist, they can instantly, mentally picture one, or a leprechaun, or something like that. Time, by the way. Every ancient culture said the time was the number 4. Number 4 is the only digit that doesn't exist in the first 5 digits of the Fibonacci sequence, by the way. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5. What's the only number missing? 4. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5. Time does not exist. It exists conventionally, but not ultimately. Time is a measure of masses and magnitudes. Time has no properties. The fundamental fallacy of quantum and relativity is that it reifies space and time as things that can be warped or twisted, so on and so forth, and this is absolutely not true. You know, you can no more do anything to time than you could bend unicorn farts. Yeah, can't bend unicorn farts. No, you can't bend or warp time. Time itself can be slowed. A South Pole relative to North Pole at a phase disparity of 1 to 1.618, but that means that relative to the conventional time experienced by people outside that bubble, you are experiencing a different rate of time. But once again, it is still measure mass and magnitude. This is actually how relativity and quantum, called EMR, and for example, you have to compensate for this on GPS satellite correction. It's called electromagnetic retardation. That's actually what it's called, EMR. Dr. Oleg D. Jefimenko talks about this great length, but that doesn't reify time as being something. Getting on to space. By the way, space is the shadow of inertia or ether. Space is the after effect of a divergent magnetic field. Everything around here, the negative image of this is a hyperboloid geometry. The negative image of this geometry is the torus. You kind of know what the torus is. Well, everything out here is space. The torus, of course, exists here, the divergent magnetic field, which, of course, is the dielectric field. Space is nothing. It is literally the shadow of, and by the way, space and shadow are once again the same thing. Shadow is not a thing at all. It's an absence of light. It has no principality whatsoever. So space doesn't exist, and neither does time. From the absolute perspective of rational field theory vis-a-vis Tesla, Faraday, Steinmetz, Heaviside, James Clerk Maxwell, so on and so forth. Quantum, by the way, I don't know whatever it is you think about me one way or another, but I can tell you the tattooed monkey that sits in this chair that's talking to you right now and knows a lot about the term quantum, its origins, Troland and the others who first started using the word, how it was used, why it was used, the manner and context which it was used. Das Lichtwand. It's a reference to a measure. A measure is not a thing. A measure is also, too, something that doesn't exist, that should be in this list. And quantum is just a subset of measure, just like time is. Whether it's a mile, a millimeter, or a second, a pound, or a kilogram. Here we got a nice little measure. There we go. There's a measure, 0.025 millimeters. 0.02 inches, excuse me, take that back. That's not a thing, that's a measure. Yeah? Das Lichtwand. A measure is not a thing. There is no such thing as a measure in nature. Human beings came up with the ideas of numbers and measures. Quantum, there's nothing in nature that you can call quantum. I could say my microwave in the kitchen is a quantum heating device, but that doesn't give credence or validation that quantum is something. You'll say, what about a quantum computer? What about a quantum this? What about quantum entanglement? You know, you're using a term of measure to try to rationalize something that doesn't exist. It's like people talking about shadows. Man, I was in this big shadow of a building yesterday. I was in the sun. I felt nice and warm, and I went in the shadow. I got all cold. So, you know, people think a shadow is something. Shadows, of course, just like emptiness, just like chaos, because there's no such thing as emptiness. ABC, XYZ is empty of something else. Yeah. Forms, feelings, perceptions, impulses, and phenomena are empty of, shinya, for example, in ancient Pali, of the soul. That's not a denial of the soul, that's just common via negativa. ABC, XYZ is empty of something else. So, emptiness, shadows, chaos. Chaos is just this irrational concept invented by human beings, doesn't exist from the perspective of natura naturans, i.e. Mother Nature. Negative charge, or ground. Yeah? Let's talk about ground or negative charge. These are things that don't exist. That's a discharge into counter space, by the way, just like lightning is a lateral discharge of capacitance into counter space. Well, that's the negative charge right there where lightning, you know, is dissipating either at the ground, and ground is just really a funky word for counter space, by the way. The charge was discharged in counter space. Yeah, all charge is discharged in counter space. Yep. Instead of saying ground, we have this word ground. It just means discharge into counter space. So negative charge, that's just ridiculous. That's like saying when I throw the ball up, expend a bunch of energy, I throw a ball straight up in the air. That would be example of a charge, right? You know, I've impelled something to do something. Well, when the ball reaches a maximum point and it starts to fall, oh look, there's a negative throw. Negative throw, negative charge. From the perspective of true metaphysics, vis-a-vis Tesla, Faraday, Steinmetz, Heaviside, rational field theory, there's no such thing as a negative charge. Force also, too, just another concept reification used by quantum and others in academia. Okay? Force of what, by what, upon what. I could actually talk about that kind of endlessly. Electrons, I've covered this topic endlessly. It's not my premise that electrons don't exist. Tesla said it. Heaviside said it. Even the discoverer of the principle, J.J. Thomson, he didn't say it was a particle. He said exactly what the principle of electron is. He said 1 unit of dielectric induction. Perfect! That's exactly what the principle of electron is. There's no such thing as an electron. It's absolutely ridiculous. People always think, these academicians, these atomists, think that the flow of power is the flow of electrons. Well, how does wireless power induction work? Well, blah, blah, blah. It's lines of force. Lines of what? Force? Force of what, by what, upon what? You know, this is who's on first, what's on second. These people are highly rational. They're not self-consistent. I am both rational and self-consistent. Does the center hold? Well, with me it does. With them it does not. Same thing with photons. This idea, and I know where they get it from. And this is where the word quantum comes from. The smallest unit of measure. Measurement, once again. This is the compression of the longitudinal rarefaction compression of the coaxial circuit of light, not the transverse electrical magnet. By the way, this is a reciprocating quasi-toroid. It'd actually take a long time to actually explain that. It's this, the simplicity of the coaxial circuit of light is actually divine, yet making people intellectually visualize it kind of takes a long time. The other one is absolutely ludicrous. This is what the fools of academia thinks coming out of a magnet. Virtual photons. Never been the input or output of any experiment ever done. They're complete fantasy. They're right on par with unicorns and leprechauns. They don't exist in any way, shape, or form. No way, no how. So these are the 10 primary things. Actually, technically 12. And then 13, 14, the ether. Of course, the ether is undeniable, but you can't say it exists demonstrably and objectively. And beliefs, because if it had a beginning in time through Guru Bada Bing, it's not universal and it can't be true. Well, there was no truth and everybody was doomed to purgatory until Guru Bada Bing came along in his sacred book of the sayings of Guru Bada Bing and his 10 disciples. Bada Bing disciple number 1, Bada Bing disciple number 2. Whatever you do, don't call me an atheist. That is a real insult, by the way. By the way, those are the antinomies, too. You got religion and belief systems over here. Yeah, one form of, yeah. And we have another form of, yeah, over here, which is nihilism, atheism, atomism. There is something that's completely opposite of these two. Most people are not familiar that there is. But trust me, there absolutely is. That would be monistic metaphysics vis-a-vis the Greeks and the Indians, Advaita Vedanta, original Buddhism, principal Upanishads. I hope you like this. I got a lot of books to download in the description below. If you ever want to contact me, my email is also there. Any donation is always warmly welcome. So this is the great teachings, the great lesson, or the great teaching on nothing. Not to be confused with not a thing, i.e. noumena, i.e. metaphysical principles. Don't confuse nothing with not a thing, which unfortunately what most people do. But that's just because nobody got an education. Even though they say, I went to Harvard, I got an education. Yes, you did. Kinda, sorta, but you really didn't learn anything important. You just memorized a lot of stuff, and you can't process it and assimilate it. That's a matter for another discussion, which I've already had, actually. Thank you so much. Have a lovely day. Ba-dum-bum, 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 ba-dum-bum.